I set up TalkNorwichCity 12 years ago. Actually, it might have even been 13 years ago. 2012, TNC was officially founded, and I have covered most stories regarding this football club since that point. There's been promotions, relegations, lots of them. There have been record transfers, both in and out, some of those successful, some of them not. There have been a huge amount of managerial sackings and appointments, devastating lows and unthinkable highs. And I never ever thought that I would be covering a transfer from Norwich City to Ipswich Town on TNC. That is until today. Marcelino Nunez is officially crossing the border to Ipswich Town. I am currently in France. I had the day in Paris. I had a lovely day. Wonderful day in Paris. And I had a notification through from the football club to say that Marcelino Nunez, it's a done deal pretty much. £7.5 million with £2.5 million of add-ons, and then it's done. Marcelino Nunez, last year's East Anglian Derby Day hero, or the season before, is officially crossing the border. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. And look, there's lots to get through, and I think we'll try and dissect it on the channel over the coming days, and it's still pretty raw at the moment. It's midnight France time at time of recording. I kind of rushed back from Paris back to our house to try and pen some thoughts on this, and I know the Pinkham guys and Ready and Norfolk have already done a great job. There's two ways to look at this, right? Let me have a sip of Lakens to try and let this sink in. There's two ways of looking at this. Marcelino Nunez had a year left on his deal, and if he wasn't signed this summer, then he was probably going to be leaving on a free next summer. And for a player of Marcelino's quality, that felt like a real shame. We'd covered the rumours on the channel not so long back surrounding a move to Turkey, and I said at the time it felt very kind of agent-led. It felt like his agents had maybe put something out to the press in order to drum up some interest. It was surprising, the lack of interest in Marcelino Nunez. I assumed the injuries and maybe not quite ever getting it going fully at Norwich City meant that clubs were willing to kind of sit it out and wait until he was available on a free in the summer, and foreign teams could start those conversations in January. So it looked like we were probably heading to a point where Marcelino was going to be staying at the football club. He'd played against Millwall, he'd played against Watford and Portsmouth. He'd scored against Watford and looked really good. He looked happy to be here, and everything looked rosy. You know, he went down injured against Portsmouth, and that was a real shame. And you know, I think he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. But that international break that's on the horizon kind of softened the blow a little bit on that, and actually he looked like a really critical part to this midfield this season. I entered the summer transfer window with Marcelino thinking, well, if he goes, he goes. It's kind of not the end of the world, and the key is keeping Josh Sargent. If we lose Boat Science and Marcelino Nunez, but keep Josh Sargent, I would have deemed that a really successful transfer window. But of course, a lot of the incomings so far have been really good as well. But I did see a world where the window just comes to a close, and he's still here. I also saw a world where we may sell him to a Turkish club or someone else for 5-6 million quid, and also that would be fine. I definitely didn't see a world where Marcelino Nunez was going to be playing his football at Ipswich Town this season. And as I say, there's two ways of looking at this. Ben Napper will be seeing this as a really shrewd bit of business for Norwich City. £10 million for a player that we signed for far less, where he was entering his final year of contract, and he will deem that a really bit of shrewd financial business. The context to wrap around this, Marcelino was offered a new contract, turned it down. The ownership group, Norfolk Holdings Group, were willing to let Marcelino's contract run out and release him on a free, give him one more year. He might not have, he didn't want to accept the new contract, but they were saying, give us another year and you're free to go wherever in the summer. They were willing to do that. They weren't pushing him out of the football club. He wasn't willing to do that. There was one offer on the table. That's come from Ipswich Town, and it was an amount of money that they deemed an amount they couldn't turn down. That's the football club stance. The fan stance, my stance, is a pretty simple one. And I don't think this is a controversial one. You cannot, under any circumstance, sell a player to Ipswich Town. They're a competitor this season. It's not even like they're in the Premier League or League One. They are a direct competitor to Norwich City this season in the league. And it's Ipswich Town. This sets a precedent, and not a good one. Whether it was £10 million, £15 million, £20 million, £30 million, it's not an amount worth it to sell a player to your bitter enemy. It leaves Norwich City weaker, undoubtedly. We will get onto it, I'm sure, later this week. Unfortunately, it's not the time to discuss Pell Matson, who will be joining to replace Marcelino Nunez. That saga has come to an end, which I wasn't expecting either. Pell Matson, poor bloke. I'm also really disappointed, more so than anyone, in Marcelino. I didn't see that in his character profile, and I don't think at this stage he's fully understood what he's getting himself in for. I would not want to be Marcelino Nunez on Derby Day at Portman Road in, a month's time, put it that way. This is really disappointing. There's no other way of putting it, and my fear is this heaps a huge amount of pressure on Ben Napper, who had sailed through this transfer window beautifully well, signing all kinds of different players and spending a significant amount of money. And I think most people would have had it down as a real 8, 9 out of 10 transfer window up until this point. And a lot of that good work has been ruined by selling your best midfielder to Ipswich. I can't believe I'm saying that. So where does it leave us? Well, it leaves us in a really sticky situation. We have lost our last 2 games to Middlesbrough and to Southampton in the Cup. There is pressure on Liam Manning already, somehow. And yes, there is. I think there is. With the system and the shape and all of that stuff. Again, problem for another day. But it also heaps huge pressure on Ben Napper. This is a bold move from Ben Napper. Yes, it will please the accountants. Does it please the ownership group? I don't know. Like, what's 10 million quid to them? And they were willing to let his contract run down. So Napper's gone, I think, let's say £7.5 million in the first stage is worth potential cataclysmic collateral here. There is no room for error for Ben Napper now from this point on. This will live fresh in the memory for Norwich City fans moving forwards. Marcelino Nunez selling to Ipswich Town. I've not had to cover a story even close on TNC in the last 12 years. Andy Marshall would have been the last. There's not even been a rumour over the last 12 years of a player going to Ipswich Town. And if there has been, it's been quashed. The club have never been stupid enough, and no player has certainly ever been stupid enough to make that move. It's career suicide. Ben Napper, fascinated to see what he says about this. I feel a little bit for Liam Manning. There's a Q&A, I think, with him at Carrow Road tomorrow. I don't think I'd want to be on the receiving end of that Q&A, and I think the questions might be slightly one-dimensional. But it heaps huge pressure on what is now a really big game against Blackburn Rovers on Saturday. Performances over the last couple of games haven't been good enough, and it's crazy to think how quickly football moves. And I kind of buy into the never too high, never too low. Sometimes I don't, because I want to get carried away and I want to get angry when things are bad. But that Pompey performance a couple of weeks ago was good, and the Norwich fans were high, and it was a good time to be a Norwich City fan. And 10 days later, after defeat to Middlesbrough in the league and Southampton, a really damning defeat to Southampton in the Cup, things are really looking really gloomy. And this certainly hasn't helped. The money's good. The money is good for a 25-year-old who, yes, has been good for Norwich and has scored some memorable goals, none more so than that goal against Ipswich Town at Carrow Road to win us the derby and to extend that unbeaten run. But that's forgotten now. That's forgotten. Let's just say that Liam Gibbs scored it or something. Funny old day. Funny old day. Still hasn't quite sunk in. I'm just looking at that graphic on screen now. The blue shirt, Norwich City to Ipswich Town, those logos. The Chilean crosses the border to Suffolk. Huge pressure on Ben Napper. Huge pressure on Liam Manning. And huge, monumental pressure now to keep Josh Sargent. If we sell him as well, my goodness, there could be protests. There we go. Marcelino Nunez to Ipswich Town. I feel like I'm in a fever dream. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Bye-bye.